Magdalena Vasquez stood up from the kitchen chair. When I walked through the front door of the farmhouse, my late wife Lena forbade me from visiting for the previous 23 years of our marriage. She looked at me for about 4 seconds without speaking. She told me she'd been expecting me. Then she turned toward the living room and said the sentence that split my life into a before and after. "This is Wendell. He's Lena's son. He's been waiting his whole life to meet you." I remember gripping the doorframe because suddenly my legs didn't feel reliable anymore. In the living room sat a man in a wheelchair, not a child. A grown man, maybe mid-30s. His body was twisted by severe cerebral palsy in a way that made it painful to look at him for too long, not because of fear, but because you immediately understood life had been cruel to him from the very beginning. But his eyes stopped me cold. They were Lena's eyes, same grey-green color, same quiet sadness sitting behind them. He stared at me from across the hallway like he already knew exactly who I was. Then he made a sound, not a word, just a broken little noise that carried something inside it I still can't explain properly. Hope maybe. Relief. The sound of somebody recognizing a face they'd imagined for years. Magdalena walked over and rested her hand gently on his shoulder. "Wendell," she whispered, "this is Jasper. This is the man your mother married." My chest tightened so hard I forgot how to breathe. "My name is Jasper Crowley. I'm 54 years old, and for most of my life I believed I understood my wife. I owned a small appliance repair business outside Akron, Ohio. I fixed refrigerators, ovens, washing machines. Ordinary things, ordinary life. Lena handled bookkeeping for an accounting firm downtown. We were married 23 years. And for 23 years, on the third Saturday of every month, Lena disappeared. Same routine every time. She'd wake before sunrise, pack a small overnight bag, and drive 2 hours south to her parents' old farmhouse in Ashland County. The one place on earth she never allowed me to visit. Not once. The first time I asked about it, back when we were dating, she went pale and told me quietly, "Please don't ever ask me to take you there." I thought maybe it was grief. Her parents died young, that much I knew, so I respected the boundary. Year after year I respected it, until cancer took her. 6 months after Lena's funeral, her estate attorney handed me a set of farmhouse keys and a letter she wrote before she died. That letter destroyed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, because inside it, Lena confessed she'd been hiding a son from me our entire relationship. Not because she didn't love me. Because when she was 16 years old, 2 terrified immigrant parents made her swear she would carry that secret forever. And somehow she did. If you've ever discovered something about someone you loved, after it was already too late to ask them why, subscribe. Because some truths don't arrive until the person who carried them is already gone. I sat at that farmhouse kitchen table for nearly 2 hours, while Magdalena slowly told me the life my wife had been living behind my back. Not an affair, not another family. Something far sadder than that. Lena got pregnant at 16 by a machinist from Mansfield named Daniel Hoffman. According to Magdalena, he came to the hospital after Wendell was born, looked at his disabled son once, then disappeared from their lives almost immediately. 3 weeks later, he moved across the country. He never came back. Wendell's cerebral palsy was severe. He would never walk, never live independently, most likely never speak clearly enough for strangers to understand him. And Lena faced all of that alone while she was still basically a child herself. Her parents were strict German Lutherans who believed shame was something a family survived quietly. So instead of helping her carry the burden openly, they buried it. No neighbors were told. No church friends. No extended relatives except one aunt. Lena was instructed to finish school, keep silent, and never speak about Wendell to anyone she married someday. Then, less than a year later, both of her parents died in a car accident during a rainstorm outside Ashland County. Just like that, a 17-year-old girl inherited a farmhouse and a profoundly disabled infant who depended on her for everything. Magdalena told me Lena nearly broke under the weight of it. She worked bookkeeping jobs during the day, studied at night, and spent every remaining hour caring for Wendell. Sleep became optional. Her social life disappeared. Most men her age were worried about parties and college applications. Lena was learning how to lift a child whose muscles locked painfully in place. When Wendell was 5, she tried to end her life. Hearing that felt like somebody hit me in the chest with a shovel, because I knew my wife is calm, organized, quiet, steady. I had never imagined the kind of darkness she must have survived before she met me. A social worker eventually convinced Lena that if she wanted to stay alive, she needed a life outside caregiving. That was when the arrangement began. Lena moved to Akron for work. Wendell stayed at the farmhouse with trained caregivers, and every third Saturday, no matter what was happening in her own life, she drove back to see him. For 30 years, through snowstorms, through illnesses, through our marriage, through cancer, every single month, I remember staring at the kitchen wall while Magdalena talked, realizing my entire marriage suddenly looked different in hindsight. All those Saturdays, all those moments she came home emotionally exhausted. The nights she sat quietly on the edge of the bed staring at nothing. I used to think Lena was distant sometimes. Now I understood she was carrying two lives at once. Then Magdalena handed me the letter. The actual letter Lena left behind for me. I don't think I'll ever forget the feeling of opening it. My hands shook so badly I could barely unfold the pages. The first line read, "Jasper, if you're reading this, then I ran out of time to tell you myself." I had to stop reading for a minute after that, because suddenly she felt alive again. Not dead, not gone. Just upstairs somewhere waiting for me to finish reading. The letter explained everything. She wrote about being 16 and terrified, about the promise her parents forced her to make, about trying over and over during our marriage to tell me the truth, but freezing every time the moment came. She even listed the moments she almost confessed. The night before our wedding, my 40th birthday, the day we found out we couldn't have children. That one nearly destroyed me. For years I believed infertility was just one of those sad things life handed people randomly. But Lena already had a child, and she carried the guilt of hiding him from me every single day we were together. Then I reached the part that truly broke me. She wrote, "He knows your face, Jasper. I kept your photograph beside his bed for years. I told him stories about you. He has been waiting patiently to meet you." I couldn't breathe after reading that, because somewhere out there was a man who had spent 20 years hearing about me, while I didn't even know he existed, and somehow he still wanted to meet me. If you're still listening to this story, subscribe, because sometimes the people carrying the heaviest pain are the ones loving everyone around them the hardest. That night I stayed awake until sunrise, rereading Lena's letter over and over. At first I was angry, then confused, then heartbroken. But sometime around dawn, another feeling started replacing all the others. Shame, because the woman I loved had been drowning beside me for 23 years, and I never once noticed how hard she was fighting to stay afloat. The next morning I drove back to the farmhouse. This time, I didn't come as a confused husband looking for answers. I came as a man trying to decide what kind of person he still wanted to be after learning the truth. Wendell was sitting near the living room window when I walked in. The second he saw me, he made that same sound again. Except this time, I understood it a little better. It wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. Magdalena smiled softly and told me he'd barely slept because he knew I might come back. That nearly shattered me. I spent the entire day with him. I read him newspaper articles, helped adjust his blanket, sat beside him while an old children's cartoon played quietly in the background, and slowly something painful started becoming something else entirely. Not obligation, connection. I realized Lena hadn't hidden Wendell because she was ashamed of him. She hid him because she made a promise at 16 that became too heavy to break later. A promise that slowly trapped her for the rest of her life. 3 months later, I sold my repair business. 6 months later, I moved into the farmhouse permanently. I learned Wendell's routines, learned the sounds he made when he was tired, happy, frustrated, or excited, learned how to help lift him into bed without hurting his back. And somewhere in those quiet mornings together, I finally understood my wife. Not the version I thought I knew, the real one. The exhausted, loyal, unbelievably strong woman who spent 30 years carrying a burden she believed nobody else should have to carry with her. If this story touched something personal for you, subscribe. Because sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it looks like showing up decades late and staying anyway.